It's so glad to be over here with all of you. All of you, maybe a reader, maybe a writer, or maybe a friend. But then it's wonderful to have people who share that bond with the written word. So, first of all, congratulations are in order for you, Mrinalini, for your book.
Thank you, Kavita.
Over here, I am Kavita Jhala, and I am founder of Kaffeinated Konversations. We have a community of readers and writers. Basically, I'm from Indore itself, and then I have explored other cities also and tried to connect with the readers and writers, and as well as artists also. Because after all, when we talk about literature, we also talk about art. So that is just about me, but it's not. This event is not about me. This is especially about Mrinalini and the wonderful book that she has brought out. It is a translation, yes, but it is essentially what we all need. And why do we need that? Because when I read up the statistics about translations and the work, I have seen that people who are talking about tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they are often left out on wonderful books because they are written in English or any other language, and they cannot have that in Hindi. There are a lot of readers even in my circle also who feel that Hindi should be brought out, it should be read. And not only Hindi, Bangla or any other language, Kannada, any language book that is there, it has to be brought out to readers. Because that is where we set up an equality for all readers. That is where we set a kind of a rapport with them. And so when I heard about this book, I was like, oh wow, a book that has been selling for billions. It is out especially for readers of Hindi who shall get closer to reading beautiful stories. And Mrinalini has taken that step along with Manjul publishers for this. And I was, I was feeling so good about it. So, Mrinalini, there are a set of questions also which I was, as I was reading the book, I had some questions also in mind about why she came out with this book, what was the need for it, what she felt during the whole process of writing it. And I think that's where we all, as readers as well as writers, can know more about Mrinalini. Maybe you all know about her as a friend, but we all will also know about her as an author. So, Mrinalini, before I begin, there are certain things I would like to talk about her. She is a consulting editor for Manjul Publishers, but also she is an author. So that is something that you all must have known along the way. She has been awarded the Chief Minister's Gold Medal for topping her post-graduation from MLB Girls College in Bhopal. She did her summer schooling in International Relations and Affairs from King's College, London. Having pursued her Anglo-Saxon history from University of Oxford, she added that another element of historical reading and perspectives also. She is very much passionate about arts and dance, and which is something that even I also always look forward to. So that is also another common thing between us. So, so welcome all of you again. And Mrinalini, shall I start with the questions?
Sure, why not?
Okay, great. What was your first early experience wherein you learned that language has power?
I think quite early on, because I always was a voracious reader since my childhood, and I was very keen on history and literature. Especially, I remember this one incident. I was in Lucknow, and my mom bought this book. I mean, it was this book, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet book. It was for kids with all the cartoon and images. That was the time when first time when I felt that love and that connect with literature and the power it has on its readers, all the books. So I think that was one of the earliest incidents that I could recall.
What was your age that time?
I think 5 or so.
Oh, that's quite a young age to begin with. So, I think when I talk to you, you talk in English, but then when we talk about the book, it is in Hindi. So, why a translation?
So basically, I remember coming across this Turkish serial, Aski Memnu. So it was a Turkish serial which was dubbed into Urdu language, and of course it's available on YouTube. It was a very bold serial. It was based on a book which was published in 1899 by a Turkish author, Khalid Zia Uzagligil, and it was based on adultery. So what happened that it was such a bold theme that it was banned during the Ottoman times. I was really keen on reading that book, but what happened that the English translation of that book was not available. So that was the first time I realized that language and translation is very important. Since of course my mother tongue is Hindi, and I did study a lot of Hindi while I was doing my graduation and masters from Bhopal, because it was a government university, Barkatullah, so there were a lot of students who were Hindi speakers. So the teachers also, they used to teach in both Hindi and English, predominantly in Hindi. So my Hindi in those 5 years, without even realizing, my Hindi improved. So I decided, and then I got associated with Manjul. So that was the time I decided maybe I should take the plunge of translating an English book to Hindi.
Okay. So, when we are talking about this translation, why is it a book of love story? It could be anything else, like why especially this?
So I was a huge fan of this book, and more so of the movie. So the song "Where Do I Begin?" It's one of my favorite. It's there in my playlist. I listen to it very frequently. So when the thing of translation came up, so I thought, which book should I translate? Because I came up with this idea of translating love story to Mr. Vikas Rakhija. So because this book, during the pandemic and the lockdown, I got the chance to revisit this book. And long back, I had read the Thornbirds, where there was this quote that the Greeks say that it's a sin against the gods to love someone beyond all reasons, and if someone is loved that way, the very object is strike down in the fullness of its power, and it's profane to love so much. So when I got the chance to revisit this book, I realized that maybe Oliver loved Jennifer that way, and he lost her. So that was one thing that was very, very striking, because during the pandemic we heard a lot of unfortunate news. A lot of people we were associated with were not there, and so maybe that was the reason I came up with this book, because love and loss, it has everything.
It has got all the elements that makes the readers read it. Yes. When we talk about book and translation and all that, so what are the qualities that the translator must have in order to do justice to the translation of work?
I think as a translator, I've also said this before, that we have a lot of power and we have a lot of authority to decide which words we should choose, but at the same time, it's a huge responsibility which words we are actually choosing. So many a times, like for example, I'll go with this example. We say पानी डाल दो कहीं पे भी अगर हम कहें, but if we say जैसे कहीं पे पूजा हो रही है, we will say कि जल डालना है, we will not say पानी डाल दो हवन हो रहा है. So both the things, they mean the same thing, but the way and the words, the way we say it makes a lot of a difference. So in this book also, the first line, the opening line of the book is, what can you say about a 25-year-old girl who died? And I translated it as, आप उस 25 वर्षीय लड़की के बारे में क्या कहेंगे जो जिंदगी को अलविदा कह गई है, rather than कि जो मर गई है जिसकी मौत हो गई है. So that would have looked great. So yes, these are the things. Firstly the choice of words, and then a lot of empathy with the character, the protagonist or the main characters of the book. Because what happens is that as readers we associate with the characters of the book, but as translators, I personally feel we have to live their lives. Otherwise, we cannot do justice to the book if we are talking about a novel or a story. So Yes.
So when you're talking about that, how you played around the words and all that. So when we talk about translation in the publishing industry, uh, um, I know a lot of authors who complain and say that they are not being, giving the creative freedom to explore with that. But what has your experience been as far as stretching all the words and twisting them so that the reader would enjoy it?
I think I'm lucky to be associated with Manjul because I know Mr. Akida. He's been a very close family friend. My experience has been very good. They've been very supportive all throughout. I told them in advance that in this book, Oliver Barrett, behind his father's back, he used to address him as son of a bitch. So I told them beforehand only that son of a bitch would have looked really cute. So I translated it as Mere Kharis Pitas. Because the Indian audience or the Hindi readership would have accepted it. It would have looked very, very mean, very, very cool. So they gave me that liberty. They were very, very supportive, and I took a lot of time in translating this. I took more than 6 months, and even Matilda, I have just finished translating Matilda, but I'm still doing the proofreading. So I took a lot of time with that book also. So they've given me that kind of freedom, that liberty, and that flexibility, without which I don't think so I would have been able to translate this book. So I think all the credit goes to them.
Do you think that as an author, when you translate, if you do not feel the emotion strongly, can you do justice to that kind of translation?
I think maybe the translators who are very seasoned and are more experienced than me, maybe they can, but I personally cannot. I have to connect with the main character of the book or maybe the protagonist. Otherwise, how can I do justice? I have to narrate the story in a different language from the point of view of the protagonist. So unless and until I am able to connect to that person, it's not possible. At least for me, I don't think so it's possible.
Which authors or readers have inspired you to translate this book?
Authors. I think I would say see I read I'm a voracious reader, so one author that comes to my mind is Alexander Dumas. That is the Count of Monte Cristo. That's one of my favorite books, and it was originally written in French. So what came down to us was basically the English translation. And I'm also a fan of Russian literature, most importantly Dostoevsky. So that is also originally written in Russian, which came down to us in English. So while reading these books, I used to wonder what would it have been to read these books in their original language. So I think that has been a driving force to kind of translate books, to take up this profession of a translator.
So any kind of any reader who you come in touch with, and you might have kind of discussed something about translating books and things like that.
So I basically discussed about translating books with my parents. So while I was translating, I discussed a lot of things with them. I took their advice on a lot of issues, and I asked them to proofread my this first draft. So yes, my parents, of course, because they gave me a lot of useful suggestions also while translating.
That's good. And what kind of research did you undertake to translate this book? Like, what preferences?
So firstly, the chapter 2 and chapter 3 of this book, it is on hockey match, and I know nothing about sports, and it's about ice hockey. So before actually translating and going through this book the second time, I didn't know there existed a sport as ice hockey. I did a little bit research on the sport, that it's the winter sport in Canada, and what are the rules, and what is the terminology like park and skating. So I did that research. Plus, I also used asterisks beneath the text. If I found that there is some word which probably the Indian audience would not be familiar with, so there I have retained the original word, but I have used an asterisk beneath the text. so as to convey the meaning. For example, this book is about two people who were studying in the US university. So they have these Latin honors, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. So Oliver and Jennifer both for magna cum laude. So I used magna cum laude and I used an asterisk beneath the text and I explained the meaning. So I've done it quite often in this book and I've also done it in my Veda.
Okay. When we talk about this particular book, when I was reading it, see, basically I'm not a reader who reads Hindi. I am more comfortable with English. So when I was reading this book, I found that the language was simple, and I could read it. As such, when it comes to Hindi, my pace is very slow. I do read Hindi books, but my pace is quite slow. So when I was reading it, it was kind of I could pick it up and read properly. So what do you think that keeping the language simple would connect you to readers more better?
Yes, for such a book, yes, because this book I think mostly is for teenagers or people, young readers, people who are in college. So naturally, even if somebody is a Hindi speaker, if there's a guy who has a girlfriend, so he will not use cliched Hindi while talking to his girlfriend. I mean, he would use normal bolchal ki Hindi. So that is something which I kept in mind while translating. Had it been some scholarly work, like some historical work, maybe something related to the freedom struggle or some other thing, there I would have used cliched Hindi, scholarly Hindi, because that is what Hindi readers appreciate if we talk about the scholarly work. But then this book, I wanted to keep the language simple so that the readers, young readers, are able to connect to it.
So when I ask you as a reader, like in Hindi, what books would you recommend readers to pick up?
Okay, so I am a huge fan of Dinkar because it's poetic. It's basically poetry. So maybe Dinkar, Urvashi one can pick up, and Rashmi Rathi one can pick up. Premchand also, I really like his stories. So I think these are the books one can pick up. So this the two suggestions. And if somebody likes to know more about, I think a particular time, then maybe Nirala, and these are the few of my favorite authors. So in Hindi. So yeah.
I also happen to know that your mom is also an author and she writes books. So, in what way has she influenced or impacted you as an author or a reader?
So mostly when we discuss anything, so it's generally centered around books. So we tend to discuss a lot about English books, and she reads a lot in Hindi. So maybe she read a good book in Hindi, she will recommend that book to me. And while I was translating, if there was some confusion or there was some word which was challenging to translate, I used to go to her. So she helped me. And she also did, my father did the proofreading because his Hindi is impeccable actually. So he helped me with the proofreading and with the tricky 2 chapters related to hockey.
Did you face any frustrations?
Yes, because I took a very long time translating this. So, there came a point when I thought, ye jaldi kyun nahi khatam ho raha? That kind of frustration. Because, just translating the tagline, love means never having to say you're sorry, I translated it as, प्यार कभी माफ़ी का मोहताज नहीं होता. So I took about a week to just come up with this one tagline because I wanted the tagline to be very, very catchy. Of course, it couldn't be anything near to what Erich Segal did. But I still wanted it to have some impact on the readers because it was going right on the cover. So I didn't translate anything for about a week, and I was just thinking कि क्या करूँ, and then I came up with this thing. So yes, I took a lot of time, and that is why it kind of became a little frustrating. And same is happening with Matilda. I took a lot of time to translate, and I am proofreading, so it kind of gets frustrating कि जल्दी खत्म हो जाए. I should speed up my process of translation. But then I also want to do justice to it. I don't want to do a haphazard work. So that's why I tend to take much longer than required.
I think whether it is long or not, but in the end, you are happy and satisfied. You feel that okay, you've done the right thing. I think that matters more than. So, any of you have any questions for Mrinalini? Any wishes, questions? Anything?
Ma'am, would you like to say something to Mrinalini for this book? We never heard you say anything.
Good evening to everyone, and I'm very happy that she could successfully translate this book, and thanks to Manjul for giving her a chance, and a lot of people have appreciated the translation. And as you yourself pointed out, ma'am, that the language is very simple, while conveying the meaning at the same time very readable and very simple. And of course, she took time in kind of using the correct phrases. Few examples she's given that whatever would appeal to the Indian audience or the Hindi audience. And this has come up, and it's been very well received, and I'm thankful to Reader's Paradise and to Kaffeinated Conversations for this wonderful evening that we had in conversation with her. Thank you.
This book has been one of the best seller I am told. Why no other author ventured into writing in Hindi, because Hindi is spoken by, I think, second most spoken language in the world, I think. For such a wonderful reviews, I am just reading, like Washington Post has written, अद्भुत पुरानी यादों और रोमांस से भरपूर एक मार्मिक उपन्यास, and Daily Mail has written, एक युग को परिभाषित करने वाला प्रेम. So I do hope and I wish that this Hindi translation will be a similar success, and all the best to Mrinalini.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. She has received a lot of praises from Indian newspapers also. Amara Jhala carried a half page for her book and praising her translation. So, should I conclude? Anybody else has anything to say?
मृणालिनी,
One second.
मैं लाउड हूँ,
Okay.
कोई दिक्कत नहीं. मैंने एक चीज़ पूरे उपन्यास को पढ़ते हुए महसूस की कि हर तरह के इमोशंस इसमें मौजूद हैं, लेकिन जो आखिरी का है वो रुलाने वाला है कि वो पिता अपने पुत्र के आके गले मिलता है. वो कैसे महसूस किया आपने?
मुझे ऑनेस्टली स्पीकिंग ये लगता है कि ये दो कहानियाँ पैरेलल चल रही हैं. ऑलिवर और जेनिफर की स्टोरी तो हमारे सामने है, और बैकग्राउंड में वो फादर और सन की स्टोरी है कि कैसे उनका जो बीच में डिफरेंसेस थे एंड हाउ दे कम टुगेदर. और जो बेटा अपने फादर को उनके पीठ पीछे सन ऑफ अ बिच कहता है, वो लास्ट तक आते आते जब उसकी वाइफ की डेथ होती है वो अपने फादर के गले लग के रोता है. सो आई थिंक मैं खुद ट्रांसलेट करते हुए, और क्योंकि मुझे देखना था कि वेदर द फ्लो इज़ देयर और नॉट, मैंने कई बार इसको रीड किया आफ्टर ट्रांसलेटिंग. मैंने जितनी बार भी लास्ट के 2 चैप्टर्स पढ़े हैं, मैं उतनी बार रोई हूँ. मेरी आंखों में आंसू आए ही हैं. सो वो एक बहुत खूबसूरत चीज़ एरिक सेगल ने लिखी थी, जो फादर और सन की बॉन्डिंग दिखाई कि हाउ दे कम टुगेदर.
मैंने बहुत गहराई से महसूस किया उसको. जो भी पढ़ेगा वही महसूस करेगा. थैंक यू.
मैम, आपका आगे का कुछ ऐसा प्लान है, कोई अगली किताब जो आप ट्रांसलेट करने चाहती हो?
मैं रॉयल डायल की मेटिल्डा कर चुकी हूँ, उसकी बस प्रूफ रीडिंग करके मैं मंजुल को देने वाली हूँ. मैं उनको अपोलोजाइज भी करी, उसमें भी मैंने बहुत टाइम लगाया है. तो मेरी मम्मी मुझे कहती है कि तुम बहुत ढीली हो. तो वो फैक्ट है कि मैं सही में बहुत ढीली हूँ. मैं बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम लगा देती हूँ कई बार, बट उसके बाद जो भी मंजुल दे, आई मीन आई एम क्वाइट ओपन टू वॉट एवर दे गिव माय वे.
लाइक इफ आई आस्क, आपकी कोई चॉइस हो जो आप करना चाहो?
मेरी चॉइस अगर पूछो आप तो एनीथिंग रिलेटेड टू हिस्ट्री, क्योंकि मैंने हिस्ट्री में मास्टर्स किया है. सो एनी बुक रिलेटेड टू हिस्ट्री, एनी गुड हिस्टोरियन मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगेगा इफ आई एम एबल टू ट्रांसलेट दैट वर्क इनटू हिंदी. थैंक यू.
have Bharti also with us, if he could just say.
The other day, I heard you speaking on the book released by your mother on cancer. And apart from being a good writer, you have a wonderful stage personality. You spoke very well. As far as this book is concerned, it's a classic. It's a world famous book. And I don't want to dwell on many other things, but something magical happens when you're translating a book. And a sensitive author like you must tell us that when you come across something emotional, when you're trying to express love, there is the English language. And when you're trying to express love or an emotion, there's the Hindi language. So you come across many passages which need to be very sensitively translated. So what is your opinion about this kind of writing, this kind of translation, when it comes to Hindi or when it comes to translation? Can it be easily done, or do you think you have to write a little more in terms of translation when you're doing it in Hindi?
It's a great question actually. Yes, I actually faced a lot of problems because what happens with Hindi is that many a times things, if we just translate them word by word, they tend to become crude, especially if you're talking about love between two people and their intimate relationship. So there the choice of words, I think it becomes very, very important, because otherwise if I have a lot of emotions. So in fact the first line only, what can you say about a 25-year-old girl who died? So I translated it as आप उस 25 वर्षीय लड़की के बारे में क्या कहेंगे जो जिंदगी को अलविदा कह गई हो, या love means never having to say you're sorry. अब उसको मैं translate करूँ, so प्यार में हम माफ़ी नहीं मांगते या माफ़ी मांगना ज़रूरी नहीं है. I translated it as प्यार कभी माफ़ी का मोहताज नहीं होता. And one of my favorite passages that I translated is I don't have the English one, otherwise I could have read the English one also. It was a couplet from Omar Khayyam. So I translated it as this is chapter 12. अगर मुझे एक शब्द में अपनी शादी के शुरू के 3 वर्षों का विवरण करना हो तो मैं कहूँगा मशक्क़त. हमें रोज़मर्रा की ज़रूरतों के लिए बड़ी मशक्क़त करनी पड़ी. हमारा हर दिन यही सोचने में बीतता था कि हम अपनी रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान जैसी बुनियादी ज़रूरतों को कैसे पूरा करेंगे. कई बार हम ऐसा करने में असमर्थ रहते थे और इस सब में कुछ रूमानी नहीं था. आपको उमर खयाम की वो मशहूर पंक्तियाँ याद होंगी, बस शाखों की हो छाँव और आयतों की एक किताब, एक टुकड़ा रोटी और थोड़ी सी शराब वगैरह वगैरह. So this was Umar Khayyam, which I translated to Hindi. So I think it is very important, especially when we are talking about love, what you say, that there are certain passages we need to cross, because word by word, then we, I think as a translator, it's very important that we have to be a little more sensitive, because when we are talking about feelings, so maybe when we are translating, it should not sound offensive, or the reader should not feel hurtful. So I think all these things, they are very important. Plus I think while doing any translation into Hindi, the biggest advantage is of Urdu language. Because when we use Urdu words, Urdu, as I say, very nazuk language hai. So many a times you are able to convey the meaning and without it being rude or offensive, or rather it is, even if you are saying something negative about something, you can in Urdu you can say it in a subtle manner.
So true. Looking forward to an original love story, either in Hindi or English. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Before we conclude, we should have done this before, but I request Mr. Vikas Segal to please felicitate with a bouquet of flowers, both Kavita ji and Mrinalini. Thank you, Kavita ji, for this wonderful session. notes from publishers as well. मंजुल पब्लिशिंग हाउस का हमेशा से ही प्रयास रहा है कि दुनिया के शीर्ष लेखकों की चुनिंदा कृतियाँ और को अन्य क्षेत्रीय भाषाओं में भी पढ़ने का मौका मिले। इसी कड़ी में हमने विचार किया कि क्यों ना एरिक सेगल की इस क्लासिक किताब का हिंदी अनुवाद भी किया जाए। भले ही यह किताब 1970 में आई थी, लेकिन कई दशकों बाद भी दुनिया भर में पाठकों का लगाव इसके प्रति कम नहीं हुआ है। 33 भाषाओं में इसका अनुवाद हो चुका है। हमें प्रसन्नता है कि हिंदी अनुवाद अब पाठकों के लिए उपलब्ध है। इस क्लासिक किताब के अनुवादक के तौर पर हमारी कंसल्टिंग एडिटर मृणालिनी का चयन हमने इसलिए किया क्योंकि हम ट्रांसलेशन की क्वालिटी पर कोई समझौता नहीं करना चाहते थे। मुझे यह कहते हुए गर्व हो रहा है कि मृणालिनी ने इस किताब का बेहतरीन अनुवाद किया है। अनुवाद में इतनी कसावट है कि पाठकों को महसूस नहीं होगा कि अनुवाद है कि ओरिजिनल प्रति है। हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों भाषाओं पर उनकी पैनी पकड़ है। अनुवादक के तौर पर उनकी यह पहली किताब ज़रूर है, लेकिन अनुवाद में मैच्योरिटी काफ़ी है, जिसकी तारीफ जितनी भी की जाए कम है। मैं उनके उज्जवल भविष्य की कामना करती हूँ और आप सभी का धन्यवाद करती हूँ कि आप यहाँ पर आए। थैंक यू सो मच।